I'm still wearing black from my father's burial when my stepfather shuts the boardroom door and slides a termination letter across the table. No warning, no condolences. Just, you're no longer needed here, Naomi. My hands shake as I read the words. The ink is still wet. He planned this while we were lowering my father's coffin into the ground. Around the table, board members who bounced me on their knees when I was little now stare at their phones. My father's chair, the one he sat in for 23 years, already has my stepfather's jacket draped over it. This is a mistake, I whisper, but my voice cracks. Dad always said, "Your father is gone." My stepfather cuts me off. His voice is calm, almost gentle. And frankly, Naomi, you're too emotional to make sound business decisions right now. This company needs stability. The room goes silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning. I realize this wasn't grief-driven. This wasn't sudden. This was timing. Perfect, calculated timing. While I was crying over my father's grave, my stepfather was erasing me from everything we built together. Something breaks permanently inside my chest. Not just my heart. Something deeper. The part of me that believed family meant protection. I try to speak again, but my stepfather raises his hand like I'm a child asking to be excused. Naomi has been under tremendous stress. He explains to the board like I'm not sitting right there. The grief has affected her judgment. Yesterday she missed 3 important calls because she was, understandably, emotional. I was at my father's funeral. The calls could wait, but nobody says that. We've all seen how she struggled since her father became ill, he continues. The outbursts, the tears in meetings, the inability to focus. We can't run a business on sentiment. My Aunt Patricia nods slowly. My cousin Blake studies his coffee cup. These people watched me work 60-hour weeks to keep this company alive while Dad was in the hospital. They know I never missed a deadline, never lost a client, never once let emotion compromise a deal. Security appears at the door. 2 guards I've known since high school. They won't meet my eyes. Please escort Miss Hale out, my stepfather says, and make sure she returns her access cards. I'm walked past employees who watched me grow up in these halls. Past the secretary who taught me to type. Past the maintenance man who always saved me the good donuts. The lock clicks behind me with a sound like a coffin closing. Outside the building, I sit on the curb still clutching my funeral gloves. The autumn air cuts through my black dress. Cars pass by like nothing happened, like my entire life wasn't just erased in 20 minutes. My name is Naomi Hale, and I was just fired from the company my father built, 4 hours after we buried him. The building behind me stretches 12 stories into the gray October sky. Hale Construction. My father started it in a garage when I was 3 years old. I took my first steps on a construction site. I learned to read blueprints before I could properly read books. Every summer since I was 14, I worked here. Every decision my father made, he explained to me. One day, this will all be yours, he used to say. But you have to earn it the right way. I thought I had. I have an MBA from State University. I've managed projects worth millions. I've negotiated contracts that kept us afloat during the recession. I've bled for this company. But apparently none of that mattered. Not when my stepfather decided I was in his way. A text buzzes on my phone. My stepmother, sorry about today? You understand, don't you? It's business. I stare at those words until they blur. Business. Like 26 years of my life was just business. I remember the conversation now, clear as glass. 3 years ago, my father called me into his office after everyone else had gone home. The setting sun painted everything orange. He looked tired, older than his 58 years. Naomi, he said, gesturing to the chair across from his massive oak desk. There's something I need to tell you about this place. I sat down, expecting another lecture about leadership or client management. Instead, he leaned back and studied me for a long moment. One day, this will be yours, he said slowly, but only if you protect it the right way. Not just from competitors or bad markets, from people who would destroy it from the inside. At the time, I thought he meant incompetent employees or lazy supervisors. I nodded and promised I'd always put the company first. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I hope you never have to prove that, sweetheart. But if you do, remember, sometimes the best protection looks like weakness. Sometimes you have to let people think they've won before you show them they've lost. I didn't understand then. I was 23 and thought business was simple. Work hard, be honest, treat people fairly. I had no idea my father was already preparing me for war. Now, sitting on this curb in my funeral dress, his words echo in my head like a warning I was too young to hear. The will reading happens 3 days later in the conference room at Patterson & Associates. The same room where my father signed his first major contract. The irony isn't lost on me. My stepfather controls the entire proceeding. He sits at the head of the table like he's chairing a board meeting. My stepmother dabs her eyes with tissues, playing the grieving widow perfectly. Around the table, relatives who barely spoke to my father when he was alive now hang on every word. The lawyer, Mr. Patterson, reads through the standard stuff first. The house goes to my stepmother. The cars, the boat, the vacation property in Colorado. I'm not surprised. Dad remarried when I was 16, and I always knew she'd inherit the lifestyle stuff. Then comes the business portion. I sit up straighter, my heart hammering. To my stepson, Michael Warren, I leave controlling interest in Hale Construction, along with all accompanying responsibilities and authorities. The room is silent. Michael, my stepfather, nods solemnly, like he's accepting a burden instead of a fortune. And to my daughter, Naomi Hale, I leave my personal workshop tools, my collection of architecture books, and my father's pocket watch. That's it, tools and books, sentimental garbage. I force myself to smile while relatives whisper behind their hands. They're probably thinking I must have disappointed him somehow, that I must have done something wrong. I keep smiling until my cheeks ache, but inside, I'm unraveling thread by thread. 2 weeks later, my stepfather invites me to coffee at Brewster's, the cafe where my father used to take me every Saturday morning when I was little. The manipulation is subtle but deliberate. He wants me surrounded by good memories while he destroys me. I want to keep peace in the family, he says, stirring sugar into his coffee. What happened at the office was necessary, but I don't want you to think it was personal. I sip my latte and wait. He's going to explain himself, and I want to hear every word. Grief makes people unreliable, Naomi. I've seen it before. You would have made emotional decisions that hurt the company your father worked so hard to build. I couldn't let that happen. He leans forward, his voice dropping to that fake concerned tone people use when they're about to hurt you for your own good. You should be grateful, actually. I could have made it much uglier. I could have had you escorted out in front of clients. I could have made it about performance issues instead of emotional instability. But I protected you. My hands shake around my cup, but I keep my voice steady. You protected me. Exactly. He smiles like we're finally understanding each other. And if you're smart, you'll stay protected. Don't make waves, Naomi. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I leave shaking with rage, but I'm recording every word in my memory. Someday, I'm going to need them. By Monday morning, I'm completely locked out. My email access is revoked. My company credit card is canceled. My father's assistant, Mrs. Patterson, no relation to the lawyer, is reassigned to the accounting department. She's worked for my father for 18 years, knows every client, every project, every deadline. Now she's filing invoices and answering phones. I call the main number just to test it. The receptionist, Angela, sounds uncomfortable when she recognizes my voice. I'm sorry, Naomi, but Mr. Warren said you're no longer with the company. I can't transfer you anywhere. Mr. Warren, not Michael, not my stepfather. Mr. Warren. Like he's some stranger who coincidentally shares a name with the man who married my mother. Years of work vanish overnight. Project files I created. Client relationships I built. Construction schedules I personally managed. All of it disappears like it never existed. I start to realize this wasn't about grief or emotional instability. This was about removing witnesses. Everyone who knew how much I contributed, how much my father trusted me, how much I actually did versus how much credit Michael took, they're all being shuffled around or pushed aside. The official story is that I was too emotional to handle the responsibility. The reality is that I knew too much about how things really worked. I was the only person who could challenge his narrative. But Michael doesn't know everything. My father was smarter than he gave him credit for. And some secrets die harder than others. 3 weeks after the funeral, I get a text from an unknown number. Coffee tomorrow? Tom Brennan, my father's former project manager, retired last year after 30 years with the company. He'd trained me on site safety when I was a teenager, taught me to read commercial blueprints, shown me how to spot corners being cut. If anyone knew my father's mind, it was Tom. We meet at a diner across town, far from anywhere we might run into hail construction people. Tom looks older than I remember, grayer, but his eyes are sharp as ever. "I heard what happened," he says without preamble. "Load of garbage, if you ask me." I shrug, trying to look resigned. "Michael's the boss now." "About that." Tom leans forward, lowering his voice. "Your dad came to see me 2 weeks before he died. Asked me to witness something, a document. Wouldn't tell me what it was, just said it was insurance." My heart stops. "What kind of document?" "Don't know. He sealed it up, gave it to Patterson's office, with instructions not to open it unless certain conditions were met. But here's the thing. He was supposed to sign some other paperwork the day before he went into the hospital for the last time. Never did. Kept saying he was waiting for something. Waiting for you, specifically." Tom slides a business card across the table. "Your dad was a careful man, Naomi. Careful men don't leave things to chance. Maybe you should ask yourself what he was being careful about." That night, I'm going through boxes of my father's belongings that my stepmother dropped off. Tools, books, personal items. The dregs of a life reduced to sentiment. I'm about to close the last box when I notice something odd about my father's old jewelry box, the one his father made him in shop class. The bottom sits higher than it should. I run my fingers along the edges until I find a small groove. The false bottom lifts easily, revealing a folded piece of paper. My father's handwriting, careful and deliberate. If you're reading this, it's already started. Don't fight loudly. Don't challenge directly. Watch. Learn. Wait. The company has protections you don't know about yet. Trust the process, even when it looks like you're losing. Especially then, everything you need is already in place. Dad. At the bottom, in smaller letters, check the foundation documents. Article 7, Section 3. Patterson knows. I read the note 3 times before it sinks in. My father knew. Somehow, he knew this would happen. He'd prepared for it. All this time I thought I was abandoned, but I was actually protected. I fold the note carefully and slip it into my wallet. For the first time since the funeral, I'm not just angry or hurt. I'm curious. Tomorrow, I'm calling Mr. Patterson. Tonight, I'm going to read every single architecture book my father left me. Something tells me they're not just about buildings. I spend the weekend reading, and patterns start to emerge. Every book has margin notes in my father's handwriting, not about architecture, about business, about leadership, about protecting what you've built from people who would destroy it. One note, written in the margins of a book about commercial foundations, stands out. Sometimes the strongest support is invisible. People attack what they can see, they ignore what they can't. I remember now with painful clarity how my father kept me out of certain meetings. I used to think he was protecting me from boring legal stuff or financial details. I was hurt when he'd close his office door and meet with lawyers or accountants alone. I thought he didn't trust me with the important decisions. But what if it wasn't about trust? What if it was about protection? If I wasn't in those meetings, I couldn't be questioned about them later. If I didn't know certain things, I couldn't accidentally reveal them. If I appeared to have limited access, people would underestimate my actual role. My father wasn't sidelining me. He was training me for a war I didn't know was coming. I think about all the times he sent me to job sites instead of board meetings. All the times he had me work with contractors instead of investors. I thought he was keeping me from the real business. Now I wonder if he was keeping the real business from me until I was ready to protect it. By November, the cracks start showing. Michael announces an aggressive expansion plan at the monthly company meeting. 3 new office locations, 2 additional construction crews, a partnership with a national development firm. It sounds impressive on paper, but I know the numbers. We don't have the capital for this kind of growth. Current employees are panicking. I hear it through Angela, who still texts me occasionally. Overtime is being cut. Benefits are being restructured. The Christmas bonuses everyone counts on are under review. Longtime partners are quietly backing away. Morrison Industries, our concrete supplier for 15 years, doesn't renew their contract. Riverside Plumbing, who've been our subcontractors since I was in high school, starts working with competitors. I run into Jake Morrison at the grocery store. His family's company helped build half the commercial buildings in this county. He looks uncomfortable when he sees me. "Jake," I say carefully, "how are things?" He glances around, then leans closer. "Naomi, I don't know what's happening over at your place, but this isn't how your father did business. These new contracts, these payment terms, it's like dealing with a completely different company." He walks away quickly, but his message is clear. Michael isn't just changing the company culture. He's destroying the relationships my father spent decades building. But he doesn't know about Article 7, Section 3. He doesn't know about the document Tom witnessed. He doesn't know my father planned for this exact scenario. Michael thinks he's won. That ignorance is about to become his biggest weakness. The first family member calls in December. My Aunt Patricia, who nodded along when I was fired, now sounds worried. "Naomi, honey, I hope you don't mind me asking, but do you know anything about the company's insurance policies? Michael mentioned something about restructuring coverage to save money, and I just wondered if that was normal." She owns a small percentage of company stock, my father's gift to her when her husband died. She's lived off the dividends for years. I keep my voice neutral. "I wouldn't know, Aunt Patricia. I'm not involved anymore, remember?" A pause. "Of course. I just thought, well, your father always said you understood the business better than anyone." I thought maybe he'd mentioned something. 3 more relatives call over the next week. Cousin Blake, who barely spoke to me at the funeral. Uncle Ray, who hasn't returned a phone call in 2 years. My stepmother's sister, who I've met exactly twice. They're all asking the same kinds of questions. About policies, about procedures, about things my father might have mentioned to me. They're afraid, but not for me. They're afraid for themselves. Their dividends are shrinking. Their investment is losing value. I give them nothing. No reassurance, no information, no promises that everything will be fine. Let them sweat. Let them wonder. Let them realize what they lost when they watched me get erased. The irony is delicious. They sided with Michael because they thought he had the power. Now they're calling me because they think I have the answers. They're both wrong, but they're also both right. Mr. Patterson finally agrees to meet with me in January. His office hasn't changed since I was a kid. Dark wood, leather chairs, law books that probably haven't been opened in decades. He looks tired, older, like the past few months have aged him. "Your father was a complicated man," he says without preamble. "Loved you more than his own life, but he was also terrified of what people might do to get what he built." He opens a file cabinet and pulls out a thick folder marked Hale Construction, Contingency Planning. "Article 7, Section 3 of the Corporate Bylaws," he says, sliding a document across the desk. "Your father insisted on it when he incorporated. At the time, I thought he was being paranoid. Now, I think he was being prophetic." I read the legal language slowly. It's complex, full of whereas and heretofore, but the meaning becomes clear. If the company engages in practices that violate specific ethical standards, endangering employee welfare, breaching fiduciary duty to stockholders, misrepresenting financial status to partners, ownership automatically transfers to a designated protection trustee. "Who's the trustee?" I ask. Patterson's smile is grim. "Read paragraph 4. I scan down to the signature lines. There's my father's signature, there's Patterson's witness signature, and there, in careful print, is my name. Naomi Elizabeth Hale, Protection Trustee. "It only activates if certain conditions are met," Patterson explains. "But once it's triggered, it's irreversible. Your father made sure of that." My hands are shaking. What conditions? 3 major violations within a calendar year, or 1 violation that directly endangers employee lives or company solvency. All violations must be documented and verified by an independent audit. I think about the cut benefits, the dangerous expansion, the changed insurance policies my aunt mentioned. The cracks are already showing. Michael just doesn't know they're being counted. February brings the first major violation. Michael cuts the pension fund to free up cash for the expansion. 57 employees lose their retirement security in a single afternoon. The official reason is market restructuring. The reality is that he's gambling their futures on his ego. Complaints are filed with the labor board within days. I don't file them. I don't need to. The employees my father cared about for decades are doing it themselves. They know something's wrong. They remember how things used to be. Mrs. Patterson, my father's old assistant, calls me that evening. She's crying. Naomi, they took everything. 40 years I've been paying into that fund. 40 years of promises that I'd be taken care of when I retired. Now they're saying there's no money, that the fund was unsustainable. I listen to her cry, and I remember every Christmas party where my father toasted the employees who'd built this company with their sweat and loyalty. Every year he'd say the same thing. We take care of our people because they take care of us. Michael doesn't understand that. He thinks employees are expenses to be minimized. He's about to learn they're also witnesses to be heard. The audit clause in Article 7 doesn't require a formal request. It can be triggered by external complaints. The labor board starts asking questions. The state starts asking questions, and Patterson's office starts documenting everything. Michael thinks he's cutting costs. He's actually cutting his own throat, one violation at a time. I disappear in March, stop answering calls from family members, delete social media accounts, take a modest job at a small architectural firm across town. I'm just another employee now, drafting building plans and keeping quiet. People assume I've given up. My stepmother tells relatives I'm finally moving on. Michael stops watching for me at company events. The family relaxes, thinking the threat has passed. Their relief is my greatest weapon. When people think you're beaten, they stop being careful around you. They say things they shouldn't say. They make mistakes they wouldn't normally make. They forget that quiet people often hear the loudest secrets. My new boss, a woman named Helen Carter, doesn't ask many questions about my background. She just knows I draw clean blueprints and show up on time. It's peaceful, anonymous work. The kind of life I might have chosen if my family hadn't decided I was an obstacle to remove. But I'm not starting over. I'm not moving on. I'm positioning myself for the final move in a game Michael doesn't even know we're playing. Every week, Patterson sends me updates, financial reports, employee complaints, documentation of every corner Michael cuts. The evidence file grows thicker while my public presence grows smaller. By summer, I'm invisible. By autumn, I'll be inevitable. The audit notice arrives in August. Hale Construction will undergo a comprehensive financial and operational review by the state regulatory board. It's presented as routine compliance, but I know better. Enough complaints have been filed, enough red flags raised that someone official has decided to look closer. Michael acts confident when the announcement goes out to employees. Too confident. He calls an all-hands meeting and explains that audits are normal for growing companies, that everyone should cooperate fully, and that there's nothing to worry about. But he doesn't know the audit structure my father designed into the corporate bylaws. Doesn't know about the specific triggers that activate specific reviews. Doesn't know that Patterson helped draft the regulations the auditors will use. I hear about the meeting from Angela, who's still my inside source. Michael's hands shook when he read the audit notice aloud. His voice stayed steady, but his body betrayed him. He kept saying everything was fine, Angela tells me over coffee. But then he went into his office and made a bunch of phone calls, loud phone calls. We could hear him through the door, yelling about timing and who authorized this. I sip my coffee and nod sympathetically. Inside, I'm smiling for the first time in months. My father built this trap 20 years ago, and Michael just walked into it exactly as planned. The best part? He still thinks I'm the victim in this story. By September, the family panic starts. My phone rings constantly. The same relatives who ignored me after the funeral, who nodded along when I was fired, who whispered about my disappointment behind my back. Aunt Patricia calls first, her voice high and tight. Naomi, sweetheart, I know things have been difficult between us, but I'm hoping you might have some insight into this audit situation. Do you think there's anything to worry about? I let the silence stretch before answering. I wouldn't know, Aunt Patricia. I haven't been involved with the company for almost a year. Of course. I just thought, well, you always were your father's favorite. If he'd told you anything about contingency plans or backup procedures. Uncle Ray calls the next day. Blake the day after that. My stepmother's sister. Distant cousins I haven't spoken to in 5 years. They're all asking the same questions, fishing for the same reassurances. The irony is thick enough to cut. These are the same people who watched me get humiliated and said nothing, who accepted Michael's explanation about my emotional instability, who let me walk away with nothing while they protected their own interests. Now they want me to protect them. I don't refuse to help, that would be too obvious. I just claim ignorance. Let them think I'm bitter, but powerless. Let them believe their fear is bigger than my knowledge. They have no idea that their fear is exactly the right size. October brings the preliminary audit findings. I don't hear about them directly. I'm still officially invisible, but the effects ripple through the family like an earthquake. The auditors found altered financial reports, expenses moved between quarters to hide losses, revenue projections inflated to justify the expansion, pension fund transfers disguised as operational costs. All the creative accounting Michael used to make his leadership look successful. He tries to blame the previous administration at first, claims these problems existed before he took over, that he's been trying to fix my father's mistakes. But the auditors aren't idiots, and Patterson kept excellent records. Every altered document is time-stamped. Every suspicious transfer happened after my father's death. When that defense crumbles, Michael pivots to blaming former executives, Tom Brennan's decisions, Mrs. Patterson's bookkeeping, even my handling of certain projects before I was fired. But Tom kept every receipt. Mrs. Patterson documented every transaction. And I never had authority to make the kinds of changes they're questioning. The lies collapse faster than a building with a cracked foundation. And everyone Michael tries to throw under the bus has evidence proving their innocence. He's running out of scapegoats. Soon, he'll be running out of time. The formal request arrives on a Tuesday in November. I'm asked to attend a board session as a witness to discuss my former role in the company and my knowledge of operational procedures before my departure. I dress carefully that morning. Professional but not flashy. Confident but not aggressive. The person they're expecting to see is broken, bitter, defeated. I need to look like I've moved on while still being useful to their investigation. When I walk into the boardroom, the same room where I was fired, heads turn. Some in surprise, some in relief, some in fear. Michael sits at the head of the table in my father's chair, but he looks smaller somehow. Diminished. He can't look at me directly. His eyes dart around the room, landing everywhere except my face. Miss Hale, the lead auditor says, "Thank you for coming. We understand this may be difficult, given your departure from the company, but your insight into previous operations would be valuable." I nod politely. I'm happy to help however I can. Michael's jaw tightens. He finally meets my eyes, and what I see there isn't anger anymore. It's fear. Raw, desperate fear. For the first time since my father's funeral, I hold all the power in this room. And everyone knows it. The sealed letter comes out an hour into the session. Patterson produces it like a magician, revealing his final trick, breaking the wax seal with deliberate ceremony. This was left with specific instructions, he explains to the room. To be opened only if Hale Construction underwent formal investigation while under new leadership. My heart pounds as he unfolds my father's final words. To my daughter, Naomi Hale, Patterson reads aloud, and to the board of directors of the company I spent my life building. If this letter is being read, it means the protections I put in place have been activated by necessity. The room is silent except for the rustle of paper. I name my daughter not as my successor. Succession was never the goal, but as protector of the values and people that make this company worth preserving. This role activates only if the company is endangered from within by those who would sacrifice its integrity for personal gain. Michael's face drains of color. Around the table, board members shift uncomfortably. Article 7, Section 3 of the corporate bylaws grants Naomi authority to assume operational control, pending resolution of any ethical violations that threaten company stability. This is not revenge. This is protection. This is preservation. This is love. The letter is signed and notarized, dated 3 months before my father's death. He knew. He planned for this exact moment. Patterson sets the letter down and looks directly at me. Miss Hale, are you prepared to accept the responsibilities outlined in your father's directive? I take a breath, thinking of Mrs. Patterson crying about her stolen pension, of loyal employees betrayed, of a company my father loved being gutted for profit. Yes, I say quietly, I accept. The emergency measures take effect immediately. Michael's authority is suspended pending completion of the investigation. Financial controls are frozen. All major decisions require board approval and my oversight as protection trustee. Michael finally speaks, his voice cracking. This is insane. You can't just hand control to someone who was fired for emotional instability. I'm the legal owner. I have rights. The lead auditor looks at him with the expression of someone who's dealt with this type of denial before. Mr. Warren, ownership and control are not the same thing. The bylaws your great stepfather established give Miss Hale authority to protect company assets when specific violations occur. 3 major violations have been documented and verified. What violations? Michael demands, but his voice lacks conviction. Misappropriation of pension funds, falsification of financial reports to investors, and breach of fiduciary duty to employees and stockholders. Any one of these would be sufficient to trigger the protection clause. All 3 together make it irreversible. Michael looks around the table for support but finds none. The same people who nodded along when he fired me now avoid his eyes. They're protecting themselves again, just like before. Only this time, they're distancing themselves from him instead of from me. Naomi, he says, and for the first time since I've known him, he uses my name without authority behind it. We can work together. We can fix this. You don't have to destroy everything your father built. I meet his eyes calmly. I'm not destroying anything. I say, I'm saving it. The criminal charges are filed in December. Federal charges for financial fraud. State charges for pension theft. Civil charges from investors and employees. Michael's confident expansion plan becomes evidence of his reckless disregard for company stability. The family fractures publicly. My stepmother files for divorce, claiming she had no knowledge of his activities. Relatives who supported his takeover now distance themselves, rewriting history to claim they always had doubts. The local newspaper runs a story. Construction company heiress saves family business from internal fraud. The narrative is already shifting. I'm no longer the emotional daughter who couldn't handle responsibility. I'm the determined protector who exposed corruption and saved jobs. I'm offered the permanent leadership role at a formal board meeting. The same people who watched me get humiliated 8 months ago now compete to praise my integrity and vision. The same chairs, the same table. But the power dynamic has completely reversed. Michael's lawyer tries one last desperate play, claiming the whole thing was a setup, that my father manipulated events to ensure I'd eventually take control. He's not wrong, but he can't prove it. And more importantly, no one cares. Results matter more than methods, and the results speak for themselves. Michael destroyed more in 8 months than my father built in 20 years. I'm offering stability, restoration, and justice. The choice is obvious to everyone except Michael himself. I don't take the permanent role immediately. That would be too simple, too obviously what I wanted. Instead, I spend 3 months restructuring, restoring, rebuilding. I reinstate the pension fund with interest. I rehire the employees Michael laid off. I rebuild the relationships with partners and suppliers he alienated. Mrs. Patterson cries when I personally hand her the restored pension paperwork. Your father would be so proud, she says, and I almost cry too. The company doesn't just survive, it thrives. Projects Michael abandoned get completed. Contracts he lost get renegotiated. The reputation he damaged gets restored through consistent, ethical business practices. I work 16-hour days, not because I have to prove myself, but because I genuinely care about the people depending on this company. The employees who trusted my father. The families whose futures depend on their paychecks. The community that benefits from our projects. This was never about revenge, though revenge tastes sweet when it comes. This was about protection. About preservation. About proving that integrity isn't weakness and that justice isn't always immediate, but it's always possible. When I finally accept the permanent leadership role in March, 1 year after Michael's first major violation, it feels like coming home instead of claiming a prize. Michael asks to meet with me privately in April. He's out on bail, awaiting trial, looking 10 years older than his actual age. We meet at Brewster's Cafe, the same place where he once told me I should be grateful for my humiliation. The irony of the location isn't lost on either of us. "I never thought he trusted you more than me," he says quietly, staring into his coffee like it holds answers. "I was his stepson for 15 years. I thought I understood his vision for the company." I sip my latte, the same order I had that day he told me to be grateful, and choose my words carefully. "The problem wasn't that he didn't trust you," I say. "The problem was that you didn't understand what the company actually was. You saw profit margins and growth potential. He saw people and principles and legacy." Michael looks up, and for the first time I see genuine regret in his eyes. "I could have done things differently. I could have kept you involved, worked with you instead of against you." "Yes, I agree. You could have. But you chose to see me as an obstacle instead of an ally. You chose to believe that business success required destroying the things my father valued most." He nods slowly. "He planned this whole thing, didn't he? The protection clause, the audit triggers, the sealed letter. He knew I'd fail." I consider lying, offering him the comfort of believing he was set up, but he deserves the truth, even if it hurts. "He hoped you'd succeed," I say, "but he prepared for you to fail. That's the difference between planning and gambling." Michael leaves without saying goodbye. I sit in the cafe for another hour, thinking about fathers and daughters, about protection and justice, about the long game my father played to keep his life's work safe. 18 months later, I run Hale Construction with quiet confidence and ethical precision. We're profitable but not predatory. We're growing but not at the expense of our people. We're successful in ways that my father would recognize and approve of. The employees who watched me get fired now see me lead with integrity. The family members who sided with Michael now keep respectful distance, understanding that power shifted because values shifted. The community that depends on our work trusts us again because we've proven trustworthy. I keep my father's pocket watch on my desk, the sentimental gift that everyone thought was meaningless. Inside the case, I found another note. "Time reveals everything, sweetheart. Be patient, be strong, be worthy of what you inherit." Michael was sentenced to 5 years for financial fraud. My stepmother moved back east with her sister. The family members who enabled his takeover found other family gatherings to attend. The house feels smaller but cleaner without their presence. I didn't destroy my family, I outgrew them. Exactly as my father planned. Sometimes people ask if I'm angry about what happened. If I hold grudges against the people who sided with Michael, or the relatives who abandoned me when I needed support most. The honest answer is that anger became irrelevant once justice became inevitable. My father taught me that the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's building something so strong, so ethical, so valuable that their destructive efforts become laughably insignificant. I didn't beat Michael by being crueler or more ruthless. I beat him by being better. By being worthy of protection, instead of deserving of elimination. The company my father built is safe now, not because I fought for it, but because I grew into someone capable of protecting it. And that's the greatest gift a father could give his daughter. Not just inheritance, but the wisdom to be worthy of what you inherit.